There's a kind of human parasite that doesn't want your love. It wants your pulse. Because as long as your emotions bleed, it feeds. And if you've ever felt drained around someone but couldn't explain why, this is your turning point. Because today I'm going to hand you 7 calm responses that don't just defend you, they humiliate anyone who thrives on control. If you're tired of being the one who gets manipulated, hit share and send this to the person who needs it most. Because someone out there thinks they're losing, and all they're missing is the right sentence. Silence is not the absence of communication. It is communication without permission. It is the moment when you stop handing over your psychological pulse to someone who feeds on it. Most people misunderstand silence and believe it makes them look weak, passive, or scared. But in a high control interaction, silence is the equivalent of unplugging the power cord. Narcissists survive on emotional input: praise, fear, defensiveness, outrage, even sarcasm. They don't need your agreement, they need your reaction. The moment you go quiet, their fuel line kinks. They don't get the dopamine hit of seeing you twist, explain, fix, justify, apologize, or prove yourself. Silence removes the stage they perform on, and that's why it works. Silence creates a vacuum, and in psychology, a vacuum is pressure. The brain hates unanswered loops. When you answer with calm silence, you turn the loop back on them. They now add pressure to themselves, trying to fill the space you refused to fill. They start over-explaining, contradicting themselves, escalating, baiting harder. Their composure cracks first, not yours. Silence says, I am choosing what deserves my energy. It establishes that your attention is not on the menu. It also destroys their favorite tactic: forced urgency. When you don't respond right away, you break the trance of emotional manipulation. You give your nervous system time to reboot. In that space, logic comes back online, and you stop playing the game they set up. Silence is also a diagnostic tool. A healthy person will respect the pause. They might say, take your time, or we can talk later. A narcissist interprets your silence as defiance and punishment. That difference tells you exactly who you're dealing with. Silence is strategy, not surrender. It is the confident pause before choosing how to respond instead of reacting like a puppet yanked by strings you didn't consent to. If you master silence, you master the tempo. You control the moment. You become untouchable, not because you built walls, but because you removed the bridge they used to enter your mind. Disarming agreement is the psychological equivalent of stepping out of the boxing ring while the other person is still throwing punches at empty air. When someone with a narcissistic mindset attacks, they expect collision. They expect resistance, defensiveness, a counter argument that validates their sense of importance. They are addicted to the friction. The moment you respond with a neutral acknowledgement like, that's one way to look at it, you are not agreeing. You are removing the battlefield entirely. It short circuits the dynamic because there is nothing to fight. Their script requires you to push back so they can escalate, dominate, or play victim. When you don't push back, their strategy loses oxygen. The attack starts collapsing under its own weight. They built momentum expecting you to meet them at the same altitude. Instead, you let their accusations fall through empty air. The power of phrases like, I see why you'd think that, or interesting perspective, is that they are non-committal. They don't invite debate, they don't correct, they don't clarify. They don't even imply emotional engagement. They simply acknowledge existence without assigning value. That distinction is where the control shifts. You aren't surrendering or validating their claim. You're demonstrating indifference to the emotional bait. It is a psychological mirror that reflects their projection back at them without absorbing it. Their goal is to drag you into emotional mud so they can feel taller by comparison. A neutral acknowledgement denies them the height difference. It keeps your shoes clean. It also signals something dangerous to them. You are not programmable. You are not responding to cues on command. That unpredictability makes you harder to manipulate because manipulation needs a predictable response pattern to survive. When they say something designed to provoke and all they get is a calm, almost bored acknowledgement, they feel the loss of control. They may escalate to regain footing or switch tactics entirely. Either way, your neutrality forces their hand. They have to reveal more of their strategy because the subtle tactics didn't work. And the more they reveal, the less mysterious and powerful they appear. This is how neutral acknowledgement humiliates without aggression. It makes their patterns obvious, and obvious things lose their power. Precision questions are psychological floodlights. They force clarity into places where manipulation thrives on fog. A narcissistic mind prefers ambiguity because ambiguity is where they can twist narratives, shift blame, and confuse your internal compass. When they launch accusations, guilt trips, or emotional traps, they rely on you reacting to the feeling of the moment rather than the facts. They want you disoriented. They want you so busy defending yourself that you forget to interrogate the structure of what's being said. A precision question breaks that spell, asking, "What specifically are you asking from me?" Or, "What outcome are you hoping for here?" forces them to define their intent. Suddenly, the room gets brighter. There's no space for smoke and mirrors because a specific question demands a specific answer. And specific answers are accountability. Manipulation cannot survive accountability. These questions are calm, measured, and unemotional. They are not counterattacks. They do not insult or accuse. They simply make the other person do something they rarely do, explain themselves. You are not biting the emotional hook they dangled, you are examining it, and that changes everything. When they are forced to articulate their purpose, they often stumble. They might change the subject, get angry, or pretend confusion. These reactions are data. They reveal intention. If they refuse to answer, that's an answer. If they deflect, that's an answer. If they blame you for asking, that's an answer. The question is a psychological test, and their response grades itself. This removes the burden of guessing. It protects your clarity. It also slows the tempo of the interaction. The moment you ask a precise question, the emotional speed drops. You shift from reactive to analytical. Your nervous system stabilizes because you've moved the conversation into logic where manipulation suffocates. Over time, using precision questions trains your brain to stay in observer mode instead of battlefield mode. Even if the other person escalates, you've already repositioned yourself in the higher ground, calm interrogation instead of emotional participation. The power isn't in the question alone, but in what it symbolizes. You are no longer a character in their script. You are the editor holding the red pen. Boundary statements are not walls, they're contracts. They declare the terms under which interaction with you is allowed. Most people don't set boundaries because they think boundaries require force. They imagine confrontation, shouting, ultimatums. In reality, a boundary delivered calmly is more intimidating than rage because rage can be dismissed as instability. Calm, consistent limits cannot. When someone with a narcissistic mindset tries to provoke or dominate, they rely on your participation. They want you tangled, emotional, defending yourself. A boundary statement like, "I'm not available for conversations like this. We can continue later if it's respectful," removes the rope from the tug of war. You're no longer arguing about content, you're defining the conditions. This is where the shift happens. Boundaries convert chaos into criteria. And narcissistic psychology hates criteria because criteria can't be manipulated as easily as feelings. A boundary forces them to acknowledge that your presence is not automatic. They don't own your time, they don't own your emotions, and they don't own your access. A calm boundary is an eviction notice for entitlement. When you deliver it without apologizing or seeking approval, you trigger a deeper fear in them, the fear that their influence is ending. If they react with anger, denial, or guilt tactics, it's not proof you did something wrong. It's proof the boundary is working. People who benefit from your lack of boundaries will always be offended by their return. Boundaries are not negotiations. They aren't invitations to debate. You're not asking, is this okay? You're stating, this is the price of admission. And if they can't or won't pay it, the interaction ends. This is where your power lives, in the willingness to enforce the boundary by disengaging if it's violated. Without enforcement, a boundary is just a sentence. But enforcement doesn't require aggression. It can be as simple as ending the call, stepping out of the room, or refusing to reply until conditions are met. The strength is in consistency. Every time you reinforce it, you're teaching your nervous system that you take your standards seriously. You're also teaching them that access to you is a privilege, not a default setting. Boundaries don't just protect you, they retrain the world on how to treat you. Time dilation is the deliberate disruption of urgency. Urgency is one of the most common tools of manipulation. Someone with a narcissistic mindset pressures you to respond now, decide now, fix now, apologize now, because the faster you move, the less you think. Speed is the enemy of clarity. They want you in emotional autopilot, reacting instead of evaluating. When you say calmly and without apology, I'll get back to you tomorrow, you are declaring sovereignty over your own pace. You are refusing to operate on the timeline they set. This is more than delaying a conversation. It's breaking a behavioral pattern. They expect panic, scrambling, immediate compliance. Instead, they get composure. That composure communicates something powerful. You are no longer programmable. It signals that your nervous system belongs to you again. Manipulators use time pressure because it shrinks your imagination. When you feel like you must respond now, your brain focuses only on the threat in front of you, not the options around you. By slowing down, you widen your cognitive field. Options appear, alternatives emerge, logic comes back online. The nervous system stops bracing for impact and starts planning for outcome. When you demand time, you create space for strategy. That space is where your power returns. It also unsettles the manipulator. If they can't control the clock, they can't control the narrative. This often triggers emotional backlash. They might guilt you, accuse you of avoidance, or escalate to regain momentum. This reaction is information. It tells you they needed urgency to maintain influence. Healthy people respect your need for time. They might discuss logistics or ask genuine questions, but they don't punish you for slowing down. The contrast is the diagnostic. Another effect of time dilation is that it flips the psychological frame. Instead of being the respondent, you become the evaluator. They are now the one waiting. They feel the pause. They feel the lack of access. Their control becomes a question mark instead of a given. Even if they try to fill the silence with pressure, you're already outside their tempo. You are responding from a place of decision, not fear. Time dilation isn't avoidance, it's authority over the moment. It proves that your boundaries include the clock itself. Value reframe is the moment you remove the battlefield entirely by refusing to defend your worth. A narcissistic mind survives on the belief that they are the judge and you are the one being judged. They throw insults, comparisons, and character attacks not to describe you, but to define you. They want you scrambling to prove you're good enough, loyal enough, smart enough, respectful enough. Every time you defend yourself, you are accepting their role as evaluator. You're saying, your opinion matters, your approval decides my identity. But when you respond with something calm and steady, like your opinion of me isn't my responsibility, the entire structure collapses. You're not fighting the accusation. You're not explaining or correcting. You're refusing the premise. A value reframe says, you don't get to be the authority here. You don't get to assign worth and expect me to pay attention to the score. This is psychological freedom, and it is humiliating to those who rely on judgment as a weapon. They are expecting three things: defensiveness, emotion, validation of the attack. Instead, you give them none. The attack lands on the floor with no audience. It reveals something uncomfortable for them. Their words only had power when you believed they did. When you stop treating their voice as the loudspeaker of truth, they lose the ability to shape your self-perception. That's not just a shift in the conversation, it's a shift in identity control. Value reframing also forces them to deal with their own insecurity. People who attack others do so to avoid looking inward. When you stay calm and detached, you become a mirror. And what they see in that mirror is a person who cannot be dominated. Over time, this response conditions your mind too. Each calm refusal rewires the instinct to chase approval. You become self-referencing instead of other-dependent. Confidence becomes internal, not rented from someone else's mood. The power of value reframe is simple. They can throw the punch, but you decide whether it becomes a wound or just air. The quiet exit is the moment you stop participating in the theater they built to keep you emotionally captive. It's not dramatic or violent. It's not slamming doors or screaming final lines like a movie character. It's a calm decision that the conversation, the argument, the performance they're trying to pull you into no longer meets the criteria for your presence. When you say, I'm leaving this conversation now, and actually leave, you're doing something far more powerful than fighting. You're redirecting your life energy. A narcissistic mindset relies on continuation. They need the next round, the next explanation, the next attempt from you to make them understand. They don't want resolution, they want perpetuation. The argument isn't meant to end, it's designed to loop until you break. The quiet exit breaks the loop. It introduces finality where they expected infinity. And that finality is humiliating to someone who believes they are the gravitational center of your emotional universe. The power isn't in the sentence itself, it's in the follow-through. Leaving the room, hanging up the call, not responding to the text, not as punishment, but as policy. When you exit without theatrics, you eliminate their ability to claim victimhood or twist the scene into a narrative about your instability. You gave a clear boundary, a clear threshold, a clear signal. They chose not to meet it, so you chose to leave. That is accountability in action. It also interrupts the reward cycle in your brain. Your nervous system is used to staying, explaining, absorbing, trying. By exiting, you retrain your body to understand that retreat is not failure. It's preservation. This lowers the psychological cost of future boundaries because you've proven you can enforce them. A narcissistic mind will often panic at this. They may chase, provoke, guilt trip, or love bomb to pull you back in. This is data, not temptation. Their reaction reveals how much they relied on your inability to walk away. The quiet exit is not abandonment of the relationship.